Shalom, 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 shalom.
Welcome to A Taste of Shabbat. I'm Doug Millstone, the president of Bet Tikva. Yasher Kolach to everyone who helped this morning. Rabbis Grover and Sachs, Chazan Kovari, Ruben on the piano, and Ricky, who did all of the production work. Our town hall meeting last Wednesday was a great success. We had over 180 computers. How many people was that? Who knows? If you missed it, it was recorded and available for the members of Bet Tikva on the Bet Tikva website. There will be more meetings like this to keep you informed of what's happening at our synagogue. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and please stay safe.
ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג עם מקדשי שבי כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטובך ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג וישבי רצית בו וקידשתו ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג חמדת ימים אותו קראת זכר למעשה וראשית ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקורי עונג לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור נגיד
The great British philosopher Bertrand Russell quips in one of his essays that even though science has lessened humanity's belief in magic, sorcery, though condemned by the church, is still officially a possible sin. It's a funny idea. How do you ban something that you don't believe exists? The thought of witchcraft and its efficacy seems so foreign to most of us in 2020. Yet even in the Jewish world, we have remnants of this very ancient way of thinking. The idea that one can say a set of magic words that impact the world is ingrained in the way many think about prayer. If I pray for X, God will cause X to happen. I hate to come off as blasphemous, but such thinking is outdated. It is an artifact of long forgotten ways of viewing nature. I recognize that most of those listening don't think of prayer in this literal way, like a magical incantation. Yet I'm afraid that even those in this category have been offered no alternative to thinking about prayer. This is where Jewish education and institutions have failed the test of modernity. It is good we do not simply think of prayer as magical formulas. Yet without openly addressing this change, we have failed to give people a viable substitute as a reason to pray. If the efficacy of prayer is not that it is answered, how do I know my prayers are successful? How do I know that I am praying correctly? Let us examine our sources for some guidance. In Mishnah Brachot, dealing as its name suggests with blessings, Rabbi Gamliel says, Kol yom adam mitpalel shmona esrei. Every day a person should say the Amidah. And this is juxtaposed with the following Mishnah, in which Rabbi Eliezer proclaims, if a person makes their prayer fixed, their prayer ceases to be real prayer. The tension between these positions of these two great rabbis, it captures the struggle of making prayer work. Establishing set prayers, writing them down, it allowed us to create a prayer experience in which we could build community. Everyone came out to do the same thing, open the siddur, recite the same words. This we could do together. Even more, one could step into any synagogue they found themselves near and join with relative ease. They all followed the same basic structure, contained the same blessings. Yet this was the great downfall of prayer for the Jewish people. It wasn't immediate. But once we were given specific formulas for prayer over time, the words grew stale on our tongues. Their power began to diminish. To paraphrase Rabbi Eliezer, prayer is only prayer when you mean what you say. Two of my favorite Jewish philosophers, Mordechai Kaplan and Yeshua Leibowitz, they come from opposite ends of the spectrum. They're so far apart. Leibowitz was an Israeli chemistry professor by day and an Orthodox Jewish philosopher by night. Kaplan was the founder of the Reconstructionist movement. And when it comes to their belief on prayer, they could not disagree more. They were a modern-day Rabbi Gamliel and Eliezer. Leibowitz believed one should pray for the same reason you do any other commandment. God said so. Every mitzvah for him was a fulfillment of the command to serve God. This is best done when you would rather do something else. It is in those moments you know you are truly serving God and not yourself, he says. In fact, he was so extreme. He believed if one fulfills a commandment for any other reason, they haven't fulfilled it at all. It is said that if it was a particularly good mood he was in, and he feared he might pray out of genuine appreciation for something, he would go to his lab, work on a difficult problem until he was miserable. Then and only then would he pray the afternoon service, when he was certain he was doing it for no reason other than God. Kaplan, on the other hand, advocated the opposite, reconstructing prayers and rituals, imbuing them with new meaning for the modern world. He once wrote that prayer should be limited to the devotions which voice a person's individual needs of their spirit. Or in non-Kaplanese, if you don't mean it, don't say it. Despite the wide gap between the beliefs of these two Jewish giants, they agreed on one thing: prayer does not change God. This is where we are today in modern Judaism. Most of you tuning in likely share this belief. But again, we've left out the most important part of the conversation. If prayers aren't defined as successful because they're words that change God, how should we define it? How do we know if our prayers are working? I want to tell you from personal experience, prayer does make a real impact in the world. And you can know that your prayers work, but you have to be willing to throw out the old ways of thinking. Prayers that are real, that cause a physical effect on the world, are the ones that cause a physical effect in each of us. They're the prayers that cause us to be better versions of ourselves, that cause us to be holy and perform holy acts. Words that open our eyes and our hearts to see things we would otherwise overlook, to observe what too often we ignore. As Kaplan would say, words that give us God consciousness. According to Jewish law, we are supposed to recite a blessing before doing certain acts. For example, we say hamotzi over eating bread. But if we say it without eating bread, we are told we have recited a bracha levatala, a blessing in vain, a desecration of God's name. Each time we open these books and we don't allow these words to inspire us to see God in the world, we are reciting blessings in vain. If you approach the Siddur from this view, the question isn't why weren't my prayers answered or why were my prayers not effective. Instead, we ask ourselves, why were we not affected by our prayer? When you recite the prayer for rain, we don't expect it to cause rain to fall from the sky. Instead, it should be an opportunity to be more conscious of how we use water, more appreciative of what we have, and more caring for those who don't have access. A prayer for peace, it shouldn't have an expectation that a divine arm will reach out from the sky and stop war. It should make us ask ourselves, what is it that each of us can do to make the world a little more peaceful, a little more loving? The success of a petition for healing shouldn't be determined by the health of an individual alone, but how much we appreciate our own health, how much we appreciate those who work tirelessly to care for the people we love, and most of all, how do we support those most in need of healing? An effective prayer is a prayer that affects the life of the person praying. There is something to be said for Rabbi Gamliel's position. The words printed on the pages of our Siddurim connect us to each other. They connect us to Jews throughout the world and throughout history. By writing them down, by reciting them in each generation, we keep the tradition alive. But if we don't give them new meaning, if we don't give them the power to change us, then what power do they really have? What value does such a stagnant spiritual life have? One of the tragedies of COVID is that we cannot gather together and pray as a community. We cannot sit in our sanctuary. We cannot open our Siddurim. We can't chant these ancient words together. But rather than focus on what we've lost, I want to focus for a moment on what we've gained. In this unique moment of Jewish history, we have an opportunity. Each of us has an opportunity to work on our personal prayer lives, a chance to do deep and meaningful work. On a Shabbat morning, you don't have to worry about where the congregation is. Are you davening too fast or too slow? You don't have noises and distractions that come from bringing a group of people together in a single space. Sure, you could choose not to open a Siddur until this crisis passes. You can get by feeling the Shabbat spirit, listening to virtual singing of Shabbat melodies. But if you do that, and that alone, you are letting a great opportunity pass you by. Instead, this is what I ask. Open your Siddur. Pick a prayer and sit with it. Read it slowly in Hebrew, in the English. Ask yourself as you read each line, what does it mean to you? Beneath what you are asking God for, figure out what you are asking yourself for. Think about what inspired the person who originally wrote it. Take 10 minutes. Sit with a single prayer. Read a commentary. Let its words wander through your mind. Rather than having to rush to the next page so we can stay together, go at your own pace. Allow yourself to pray not just the words, as Rabbi Gamliel calls for, but to pray with the intention Rabbi Eliezer demands. In our parsha this week, we find the priestly blessing, Birkat Kohanim. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the founder of the modern Orthodox movement, writes, "There are no magic powers inherent in the priest himself or in the blessing he pronounces. The attitude of the one who pronounces it is an essential part of the blessing. Indeed, it is his attitude that turns the formula he recites into a blessing. Prayer is not simply an artifact of an ancient worldview. It is an important and meaningful part of a spiritual life well lived, but only if we give it a real opportunity. Prayer can change the world, but only if we allow it the ability to change us. Instead of asking God for something this Shabbat, I want to conclude with a request of each of you. Give it a try. Pick one prayer, and rather than just reciting the words, take this opportunity to truly pray. Shabbat Shalom.
כי המלכות שלך היא ולעולמי תמלוך בכבוד ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד כי המלכות שלך היא ולעולמי תמלוך בכבוד ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ מהיום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ונשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ונשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ויחד ויפות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא אחד ואין שני להמשילו להכירה בלי ראשית אוי בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמצווה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא וצור חבלי ועץ הדר ויוניסי ומנוס לי מנחוסי ויום נקרא וידו הפקידוכי ויקישה ועידה וימוכי לפי אחי אדוני לי ולא ירא אדון עולם השם הלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נסע בחצו כל אזי מלך